Hello, my name is Reynolds from Tableau, and I'm here today to walk you through Tableau's COVID-19 Data Hub. With the rapid spread of the COVID-19 respiratory illness around the world, access to trustworthy and reliable data is essential to both public understanding and organizing an effective response effort. To do our part, we are dedicating our time and data expertise towards providing meaningful and accurate information to the public. Tableau has launched a free resource page where the public can access relevant data visualizations, curated data sources, and quick start Tableau dashboards, all in an effort to enable anyone to see and understand the effects of COVID-19 through data. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to walk through the Resource Hub and show how you can get started on your own analysis, beginning with some of the views today. Let's go ahead and start with the view that we have embedded right into the Data Hub, which is our Coronavirus Daily Global Tracker. At the top, we have some high-level KPIs showing us the total number of confirmed cases, the daily change in these cases, as well as the number of new cases for that particular day. On the right, we have similar metrics pertaining to our number of deaths. Below our KPIs, we have a bar chart showing us the number of net new cases per day from a global level. And to the right, we have a map showing us the number of confirmed cases for each individual country. Finally, on the right, we have a time series showing us the total number of confirmed cases over time for each individual country within the data set. Now, I can select a country in this view to filter my data exclusively to information about that particular country, or I can even switch the metric so that I can get a different angle on my analysis. This view was created just to give you a quick snapshot of what the status of the coronavirus is at the global scale. However, let's also take a second to take a look at some of the more industry-specific views we might have available. Organizations across all industries and sectors are being impacted by COVID-19. Public health organizations are on the front lines helping stop the spread, while human resources departments are charged with keeping employees safe, and financial institutions are trying to find ways to best weather the storm. To address these matters, and with the help of our partner network, the Data Hub now contains a number of public-facing, industry-specific coronavirus response dashboard. Quick note, all of these views can be downloaded locally if you'd like to dive deeper, iterate on what already exists, or even plug in your own data. So, for those of you who are more interested in starting your analysis from a human resources perspective, our partners over at Lovelytics have created a human resources dashboard to give us an understanding of how to keep employees safe, but also how to implement return to normal ops when locations reopen. At the top, once again, we have some high-level KPIs showing us the number of confirmed cases for the U.S., our total number of employees, the number of these employees that are considered at risk, these being employees who are 60 years and older and or have pre-existing medical conditions, and then the percent of our total employees that this at-risk group makes up. Below that, we have views showing us the number of at-risk employees for each one of our individual buildings. We have them split up by age group and distribution. We can also see the number of at-risk employees we have in each individual state or each individual city. Finally, on the right, we have our bar chart showing us the number of confirmed cases for each individual state. I can use this bar as a filter if I'd like, so I can select New York to filter my view down to just information specific to the state of New York. I can even select the metric that I want to look at. I can see if I want to see if the total number of confirmed cases, my number of employees, or even the number of employees at risk. Next, we have our dashboard brought to us by California Open Data. And this is a statewide statistics dashboard that's showing us some high-level information about the state of the coronavirus within California. So once again, on the left, we have our KPIs showing us our information about the number of positive cases, number of deaths. We also have our number of lab tests conducted statewide. Below that, we can see the daily change in these numbers, or we can look at our time series to see a wider perspective of how these numbers have changed. On the right, we have our map showing us our total number of positive cases for each county within the state of California. And below that, we have a bar chart and some KPIs showing us the demographics of these positive cases by gender and age group. Finally, on the right, we have our bar chart showing us the number of cases for each particular county. We can see the changes over time if we hover over that and look at our tooltip. or we can even change, once again, the metric that we're looking at. To get the same view, but more geared towards a hospital perspective, we also have this similar dashboard. However, this just pertains to hospital data, or to healthcare data. More specifically, we have our number of responding facilities, number of total beds, and some information on positive and suspected COVID-19 patients. Finally, for our friends in SLED, we have what we like to call a dashboard of dashboards. This view you can think of as a dictionary or a glossary to navigate you to different coronavirus SLED-related dashboards. So if I hover over any one of these tabs, I can get a summary view of what the dashboard might be telling us. And if I select that actual tab, it's going to navigate me to where that dashboard lives in public. Here, I can scroll and filter on the dashboard, or I can even grab an embed link if I want to put this in my own public-facing portal. So, now that we've gone over some of the views that are already available, let's try to head back and look at some of the resources we have available for our own analysis. So, for those of you who want to create a more custom analysis but don't necessarily know where to begin, we have created the COVID-19 Starter Workbook. This workbook, created in partnership with Zen Masters Anya Ahern and Alan Walker, as well as Tableau partner CR Schema, contains an embedded connection to coronavirus case data sourced from Johns Hopkins University. The idea behind the Starter Workbook is to not only give you a space to analyze your data locally, but also to give you a polished dashboard that can be readily embedded into your own web portal. With that in mind, let's download the Starter Workbook and take a look at exactly what it's showing us. So, when we open the COVID-19 cases starter dashboard, we have a number of views available to us. Starting at the top, we have a bar chart showing us the number of cases for each day. Every bar in this chart represents, once again, a specific day and time. And if I hover over that bar, I can see in tooltip some information specific about that day. For example, the number of confirmed cases and deaths. To the right, we have a similar bar chart. However, this is showing us the number of deaths over the same time period. Below our bar chart, we have our map. This is showing us the number of confirmed cases at the country and region level. But however, over any one of these points, I can get information about that geographic location. And this is also mirrored with our death metrics on the right. So you can see our mortality rate, and then also our confirmed cases. Finally, at the bottom, we have our bar chart showing us a snapshot of the total number of cases to date for each country. This can be used to just get a quick idea about what's going on in any particular nation. Now, while as a static report, this is going to provide us a lot of helpful information, there's also a certain level of interactivity built into this dashboard. For example, a user could select a range of dates and maybe add in maybe just a grouping of countries to get a more granular view of the data. I can also select a specific country within that grouping that I've selected, or I can more manually designate the time frame that I want to examine. Now, while this is already a great start, I may also want to bring in my own data to gain a better understanding of the impact of COVID on my organization. To do this, I can easily join or blend new data on top of the Johns Hopkins data source. For this example, I will be using a data set containing employee location information so I can show how COVID-19 is going to affect our ability to operate nationwide. So one thing I do notice, though, is that the data set that I'm going to be bringing in is really only focused on the continental U.S., while all these views are actually focused on more of a global perspective. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually create a new sheet. Now, I mentioned that I just want to examine the continental U.S., so I'm going to start by double-clicking on Province State to create a map. And now I'm just going to select the area of interest for me, in this case, once again, the continental U.S. I'm going to go ahead and filter out some of these regions in Canada that I've left. And now I've filtered down just my area of interest. I'm also going to select all these points so I can now create a set And once I have this set created, I can use this on our data source as a data source filter to make sure that all the data and all my views will be filtered to, once again, just that continental US region. So now that I have my data filtered, the first thing what I want to do here is actually establish my base layer. What I'm most interested in is seeing the number of cases I have in each state and then overlaying the number of employees I have in that particular state so I can see how many people I have at risk. I'm going to go ahead and take our cases metric. I'm going to add that to color. Now, some of the things I want to make sure I'm doing is filtering the most recent date. I want to make sure that I have the most up-to-date data. So I'm going to grab our date field and do that. And then I also want to make sure that every single state with more than 10,000 cases is represented well here. So I'm actually going to edit our color scale to have our endpoint be 10,000. Okay, so now that one, I can see my hotspots, and two, I've got my base layer established, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my next data source. To do that, I'm just going to perform a simple blend by adding a new data source. In this case, it's living in a text file. And once I've added that data source, I need to make sure I establish my blend relationship. Now, in this case, the data source I'm looking at only contains my employee name, the region they work in, as well as the state. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm blending on state and province. To do that, I need to go up to this data tab, edit a blend relationship. I'm going to add custom. And then from my primary data source, I'm going to select state and province, and then state my secondary as well. Now that I've established this blend, I can go ahead and take my employee name field and drag it to my view. But first, I want to make sure that I'm duplicating my latitude so I can have two separate layers. So now I've got my second layer. I'm going to go ahead and drag off some of the fields that aren't as relevant. I'm going to take my employee name, and I'm going to add that to size. Now I can see for each state, I have a circle showing me the total number of employees I have. And at the top, coloring the state, I can see the number of confirmed cases. Now, for some aesthetics, I might want to increase the sizes a little bit, maybe edit the colors so they're a little more visible. Finally, I'm going to dual axis this view so I can see my data overlaid. So just like that, I filtered my data, pulled in a new data source, and created a completely different visualization, marrying my COVID data with my internal employee information. Now, if I navigate back to the dashboard, once again, I want to make sure I only have relevant views here. This snapshot at the bottom isn't going to be as helpful because really we're only looking at the US. So I can go ahead and get rid of that. And then I might want to replace my map with that new view that I created. So now I have that original bar chart filtered to just information about the US, but I also have my map below, fully interactive, so I can see exactly what is going on with COVID-19 and my employees. One thing I do want to point out is that these can all be easily optimized for mobile viewing. What we can do is we can go here to device preview, and I can see exactly what that might look like on my phone, tablet, really any device I want to. So for more information about the starter workbook, we actually have a separate dash under the Instructions and Data Sources tab. And here I can see information about the Johns Hopkins data source that is used to create it, as well as more information on how to connect and create my own analysis. Now that we've shown you one of the ways that we can bring in new data into the Jumpstart workbook, let's actually talk about that original data source used to create it. For users who want to start from scratch, we have posted the same Johns Hopkins data source used in the starter workbook to the resource hub so that users can download the data source or connect live in order to create their own analysis. Options for connecting live to the data source and information on how to keep the data fresh can be found right here on the hub. And that can be found right here under this Access Data tab. I can see that I've got an option for connecting to our Amazon Web Services where we are hosting live data. We also have our Data World connection that contains the hyperfile as well as a CSV. And finally, for the easiest way to connect the live data, we also have this same data mirrored here in Google Sheets. So whether you are leveraging the Jumpstart workbook or starting from scratch, understanding the structure of this data is going to be crucial to building dashboards that accurately reflect the state of the coronavirus. With this in mind, I want to take a moment to actually discuss that structure of that Johns Hopkins data source to make sure we're creating the most accurate analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and just download the hyperfile. And once I have that hyperfile downloaded, I'm going to go ahead and open up a new workbook. So in the Johns Hopkins data source, we have roughly 14 fields. On the left, we have our case type. This is showing us our confirmed cases as well as the number of deaths, breaking our cases into two different categories. We also have our sum number of cases. You can think of this as a snapshot in time. What we do is we collect the total number of cases for each day, and we post that as a row of data here. So you can think of this as more of a cumulative snapshot. To the right, we have our difference. This is more or less the number of new cases. What we've done here is we've taken the total number of cases for the first day and subtracted the previous day from that to get the difference in new cases. On the right, we have our date field that can be used for time series analysis. We have our country and province fields for geographic analysis. We also have some custom lat and longs if you want to get a little more granular with that geographic analysis. And finally, we have our prep flow runtime. This lets us know when the data was last refreshed. It has both a date and time stamp. Now, I mentioned earlier that cases is actually a cumulative snapshot. To show that, I'm going to go ahead and start a new sheet here. And I can see if I take our cases field and I drag that to our view, we're getting a pretty large number here. We're getting about 30 million confirmed cases. Now, we know that is not the actual case right now. We know it's somewhere around 2 million. But the reason for this is that I've actually not filtered or shown a level of granularity in the date field here. So to get the total number of cases for today, what I'm going to make sure I do is grab our date field and filter to the most recent day. Now we can see that accurate 2 million number because we filtered to the most recent day. Now, this could also be represented by taking our date field and dragging this to columns to create a time series. Once again, we have that 2 million number, but then we also have the number of cases for each previous day, creating a smooth time series for us to analyze. The other field I want to discuss here is this difference. As mentioned, this is actually the number of new cases per day. So some of the things I can do here is take our difference field, drag that next to our cases, some cases in rows. Maybe I can even dual access these. So now I can see our total number of cases per day, our number of new cases, and I have a quick idea of how these relate. One of the things I might want to do is also add in our case type to our total number of cases, and then maybe make that an area chart to increase the readability of the view. So navigating back to the Data Hub, that's some quick information on 1, how to create a starter workbook, 2, understanding the Johns Hopkins data source, but 3, how to make sure that we're actually creating accurate analysis. Now, we've only shown a few of the views available here. If you're curious to know more or want a little bit of extra inspiration, you can also hit our Explore to More Visualizations tab. This will navigate you directly to our Coronavirus Hub on Tableau Public, where we can see all of our views posted by our user community. So as you use data around this outbreak, it's important to remember that it's difficult to provide an accurate count for the number of COVID-19 cases worldwide because of the vastly different approaches to both testing and reporting. Remember, even data visualizations based on accurate data can be misleading. We highly encourage everyone who is thinking about leveraging this coronavirus data to read more about these topics. A few suggestions are blog posts on data viz best practices, as well as a post on 10 considerations before you create another COVID-19 chart. Links to these can be found at the bottom of Data Hub. We are constantly inspired by our amazing user community and the visualizations that are built by you. Tableau is always open to new data visualizations and/or data sources. And with this in mind, we highly encourage you to publish your own views to Tableau Public to share your unique visualizations with the broader community. If you would like to, you can also submit your views to the Tableau Public team. Submissions will be reviewed by the Tableau Public team, who will determine if we want to promote the submitted view or data source to our resources page. You can send in your work via the link hosted on the Hub under Submit Your Visualization. Most importantly, our aim for the Resource Hub is to provide everyone with easy access to reliable and up-to-date COVID-19 information, and hopefully, through this, drive change through data. Thank you for your time. I'd like to open up the floor for a Q&A.
Hey, Reynolds, this is Tyler from Tableau as well. I did receive one question to throw out there to the greater crowd about when accessing the hyperfile for the Johns Hopkins curated data source, if you need to create an account through Data World. I believe the answer is yes, but it's a free account. It takes a second. It's just associated with an email. I personally have used this, source quite often when accessing data sources, and it's just quick entering your email in there. I believe you do have to create an account. And let me check other questions along the way. But all the information needed to know, where these data streams are being pulled from, regardless of what type of file download you're working with, if it's a Hyper, if it's Google Sheet connection, if it's through the AWS data exchange, all the information of how that data is being pulled is contained within the Hub or the link associated with the Hub itself.
I do want to point out this blog post by Jeremy Blaney that also dives a little bit deeper into, one, how we've sourced this data source, but two, also your options for connecting and data that it presents. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper, this blog article is also a great place to start. You can find it in a couple of different places on the Hub. The easiest one I found is just this question mark at the top of our Coronavirus Daily Code Tracker. You can select that and it'll link you directly.
One quick question as well that came up: how can I see the state/province-wise data in the starter dashboard? If you download the starter dashboard itself locally to your machine, you can go ahead and access that field and add a different level of granularity to your view. That is baked into the Johns Hopkins data source. In addition to, if you leverage any of the Hyper files or data sources, on our end for Tableau, we've added county into the level of detail for your convenience and analysis. But that is a field you'll be able to leverage within the data set itself. And then Reynolds, I don't know if you had a moment, but if you wanted to speak to, once we've, either built in connections to a net new workbook or we're leveraging the starter workbook itself, how exactly do we go about refreshing that data as the Johns Hopkins data source updates along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of different ways you can do it. One of the things that I was doing when I first started my analysis was just downloading the new Hyper file every day. That's not necessarily scalable. However, so one of the things that you can do is all of the data sources that we've posted have really the same format. So right now I'm connected to that Hyper file. What I could easily do is I can go in and add something like the Google Sheets connection, which will be a live data source. And it's going to prompt me to sign in. I might not be able to here. Oh, that should get me. And here. Yep. So I can select our COVID data source. And once I've added that, I can actually just directly replace this extract if I'd like to. So once I've built out my dashboard, I can easily replace that with a live connection if I want to.
Awesome. Thank you, Reynolds. And in addition, I've seen a lot of questions along the way kind of pop up that have to do with how to learn Tableau itself. Just a good plug is just with recent events in the world that, we've highlighted today, in addition to just COVID-19 in general. Tableau is now offering 90 days of free e-learning. So that is accessible via a link. If you Google Tableau e-learning, there's a link that will take you directly to that landing page, and everyone has access to 90 days of free e-learning during these times. So I would definitely encourage you all to check that out.
Thank you so much for joining our webinar. If you guys have any more questions, you can either direct them to our team here at Tableau, or your answers could be your questions can be answered on the Data Hub itself. Please feel free to reach out if you want any additional information. Once again, thank you for joining.